On August 8, 2026, Drew Brees walks into Canton, Ohio, to get his bust and his gold jacket.
Drew Brees, welcome to the Pro Football Hall of Fame, class of 2026.
And the whole world will talk about him like he is one of the most accurate quarterbacks to ever play the position. And to be fair, when he retired, he owned the record book. Most passing yards in NFL history. Most completions in NFL history. The highest completion percentage of anyone who ever threw 2,000 passes. But every single one of those records belonged to somebody else first. So that is what we are doing today. We are looking at 7 quarterbacks, one at a time, who built the records that Drew Brees eventually passed on his way to the top. Because before Brees stood at the summit of every passing chart that matters, he had to climb over 7 legends who got there first. And every one of them defined this position before Drew Brees ever threw a professional pass. Start with the man who invented the idea of a quarterback throwing a touchdown pass in game after game after game. Johnny Unitas was cut by the Pittsburgh Steelers in 1955 before he played a single regular season snap. He went home to Pittsburgh and played semi-professional football for $6 a game on muddy sandlot fields, working construction during the week because football was not paying his bills. The Baltimore Colts gave him a tryout the next year, and what he did over the next 18 seasons rewrote what the position could be. The record that connects him directly to Drew Brees is the consecutive games touchdown streak. Unitas threw a touchdown pass in 47 straight games between 1956 and 1960. Think about what that number meant at the time. The NFL was a run-first league. Teams threw the ball as a last resort, and Unitas threw a touchdown in nearly 4 consecutive seasons worth of games without missing. That record stood for over 50 years. It survived Marino, it survived Favre, it survived Montana. It was one of the most untouchable records in the sport. Drew Brees broke it in 2012, extending his own streak to 48 straight games with a touchdown pass, and he did it on a 40-yard throw against the Chargers, the team that had drafted him.
He backed off, zone blitz, Brees steps up, finds time wide open, and there it is!
Unitas finished his career with 40,239 passing yards and 290 touchdowns, built in an era with no rules protecting the passer and no offensive schemes designed to inflate his numbers. He built the template. Brees spent his career chasing what Unitas established. Before there was a passing record worth chasing, somebody had to build one that seemed impossible. That was Fran Tarkenton. Tarkenton played 18 seasons split between the Minnesota Vikings and the New York Giants, and he did something that nobody in the history of the sport had done before him. He retired in 1978 as the all-time leader in passing yards with 47,003 and the all-time leader in passing touchdowns with 342, both records. At the same time, he was the first quarterback to ever climb to the top of both of the sport's most important passing categories and hold them simultaneously. What made Tarkenton remarkable was how he did it. He was one of the first true scrambling quarterbacks, a player who would leave the pocket and extend plays with his legs in an era when that was considered almost undisciplined. Coaches wanted quarterbacks to stand in the pocket and take the hit. Tarkenton ran, bought time, and found receivers downfield after the play had already broken down.
And if the guy wasn't open,
Tarkenton scrambling.
he would run or buy time until he found an open guy.
He went to 3 Super Bowls with the Vikings and lost all 3, which is the one blemish on an otherwise foundational career. His passing yards record stood until Dan Marino passed it. His touchdown record stood until Marino passed that too. But for years, Fran Tarkenton was the number at the top of the mountain that everyone else was climbing toward. Drew Brees eventually stood on a summit that Tarkenton was the first person to ever reach. Nobody threw a football like Dan Marino. The release was so pure that coaches still use his tape to teach mechanics today, because there is genuinely nothing to correct. And in 1984, in just his second season, he produced the number that would define quarterback greatness for an entire generation. Marino threw for 5,084 yards that season. He also threw 48 touchdowns. Both numbers sounded made up at the time. No quarterback had ever thrown for 5,000 yards in a single season before Marino did it, and the way he did it was so far ahead of everyone else in the league that it seemed like a barrier that might never be broken again. He was 23 years old. He took Miami to the Super Bowl that year and lost to Joe Montana's 49ers, and he never got back to that stage across 17 more seasons. That 5,084-yard record stood for 27 years. 27. Quarterbacks came and went. Offenses evolved. Passing became the dominant strategy in the league, and still nobody could touch what Marino did in 1984. Then in 2011, Drew Brees broke it, and he did not just break it, he shattered it, finishing the season with 5,476 yards. Marino finished his career with 61,361 passing yards and 420 touchdowns, both all-time records on the day he retired. The purest arm the sport ever produced set the standard that Brees spent his prime chasing down. 297 consecutive starts. That is a number that will almost certainly never be matched in the modern NFL. Brett Favre showed up every single Sunday for nearly 2 decades, through injuries, benchings, and the death of his own father, and the durability that defined him also let him accumulate volume records that seemed permanent. When Favre retired, he was the all-time leader in passing yards with over 71,000 and the all-time leader in completions. He had taken the records that Tarkenton and Marino built and pushed them even higher, game after game, season after season, never missing a start. His aggressive gunslinger style meant he also threw more interceptions than any quarterback in history, but that was the trade-off. You do not accumulate that kind of volume without staying on the field, and nobody stayed on the field like Favre. Drew Brees passed Favre's completions record in 2018, breaking the mark of 6,300 career completions in a game against Atlanta. Later that same season, Brees passed Favre's passing yards total as well, and the detail that separates them tells the whole story. Brees had a career completion percentage of 67.1%. Favre finished at 62.0%, where Favre was the reckless volume king who threw it deep and lived with the consequences. Brees was the precision machine who completed everything. 2 completely different quarterbacks holding the same records at different times. Favre built the volume, Brees refined it. This is the big one. Peyton Manning is the quarterback whose records Drew Brees is most directly measured against, because for a stretch of the 2010s, the two of them traded the most important passing records in the sport back and forth. Manning retired in 2016 as the all-time leader in passing yards with 71,940, and the all-time leader in passing touchdowns with 539. He had gone into Canton in 2021, celebrated as one of the greatest quarterbacks and sharpest football minds the position had ever seen. He was the standard. When you talked about the best regular season quarterback of his era, you were talking about Peyton Manning. Drew Brees passed both of those records. In October 2018, on Monday Night Football against Washington, Brees broke Manning's all-time passing yards record on a 62-yard touchdown to a rookie receiver, and Manning himself recorded a congratulatory video for the moment. Then, in December 2019, Brees broke Manning's all-time touchdown record with a 5-yard pass to Josh Hill against the Indianapolis Colts.
Will he get it here? Yes! Touchdown pass, 5-4-0 in the 504.
The team Manning had built his legend with. And here is the detail that defines the difference between them. On the night Brees broke the touchdown record, he completed 29 of 30 passes for a 96.7 completion percentage. He did not just break Manning's record, he broke it while playing one of the most accurate games any quarterback has ever played. Brees finished with 80,358 passing yards, the number that still sits at or near the top of the all-time list. Not every quarterback on this list got to build his records in the NFL from the start. Warren Moon had to leave the country first. Coming out of the University of Washington in 1978, Moon went undrafted, not because he could not play, but because NFL teams of that era were not willing to commit to a black quarterback as their franchise passer. So Moon went to the Canadian Football League, and over 6 seasons with the Edmonton Eskimos, he won 5 consecutive Grey Cup championships and put up numbers that forced the NFL to reconsider. He finally entered the league in 1984 at the age of 27, having already lost 6 years of NFL statistics to a barrier that had nothing to do with his ability. Even starting that late, Moon accumulated over 49,000 passing yards in the NFL alone. Combine his professional football numbers across both leagues, and he threw for more than 70,000 yards as a professional. He made 9 Pro Bowls. He led the league in passing yards twice. He was one of the pioneers of the high-volume passing attack, the run-and-shoot offense in Houston that put the ball in the air 40 and 50 times a game at a time when that was radical. He became the first black quarterback inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2006. The reason Moon matters in the Drew Brees story is that he helped build the modern passing volume era that made records like Brees's possible. When Brees was throwing for 5,000 yards in a season, he was operating in a passing-first NFL that pioneers like Warren Moon had helped create, one high-volume game at a time, after being forced to prove himself in another country first. We finish with the quarterback who was setting passing records before most of the men on this list were even born. Tittle played 17 professional seasons across the 1950s and into the 1960s, and he was one of the very first quarterbacks to treat the forward pass as a primary weapon rather than a gamble. In 1962 and 1963, with the New York Giants, at an age when most quarterbacks of that era had already retired, Tittle threw 33 and then 36 touchdown passes in a season. That 36 touchdown mark tied the single-season record at the time and stood as one of the great passing achievements of the pre-modern NFL. Tittle retired with 33,070 passing yards and 242 touchdowns, numbers that made him one of the most prolific passers of his entire era. He did it with no face mask for much of his career, against defenses that were allowed to hit him in ways that would draw ejections today. The famous photograph of Tittle kneeling in the end zone, bloodied and helmetless after a hit, became one of the most iconic images in the history of the sport, a picture of exactly how brutal the job was for the men who built the passing records first. Every record Drew Brees broke traces back through a chain of quarterbacks, and Tittle is near the very beginning of that chain. He was throwing 36 touchdowns in a season, when the league still thought of itself as a running game. He helped prove that a quarterback could carry an offense through the air, and that idea is the entire foundation that Drew Brees eventually built his career on top of. So there they are, 7 quarterbacks, 7 different eras. Johnny Unitas throwing touchdowns in 47 straight games on a construction worker's schedule. Fran Tarkenton scrambling his way to the top of both passing charts at once. Dan Marino setting a single-season record that stood for 27 years. Brett Favre never missing a start across nearly 2 decades of accumulating volume. Peyton Manning owning every record until Brees passed him twice. Warren Moon forced to leave the country before the NFL would let him prove what he was. And Tittle throwing 36 touchdowns in a season before the league even believed in the passing game. Drew Brees passed every one of them. Most passing yards, most completions, the consecutive games touchdown streak, the single-season yardage record. He climbed over all 7 of these legends to stand alone at the top of the record book, with 80,358 passing yards and the highest completion percentage the position has ever seen. But on August 8th, when he walks into Canton and gets his gold jacket, the records he stood on top of were built by 7 men who each pushed this position forward before Drew Brees ever arrived. That is the group he had to pass to get there, and every one of them earned their moment before Canton hands Drew Brees his jacket. Watch this next video if you haven't already. Subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.